Welcome to this session of doing business in Canada. My name is Christina Keighren, and I'm the country manager at Business Sweden in Toronto. And I am looking forward to sharing some information on how to do business in Canada. And I have prepared a few slides for the session, focusing on four areas: a little bit about Canada, the impact of the pandemic, doing business in Canada, and what Business Sweden can offer. A little bit about myself. I am born and raised in Sweden, in Jönköping, but have lived in Canada for over 30 years. I'm a Canadian citizen, and as well as a Swedish citizen. And I feel like I have one leg in each country, and really feeling very good about both countries, and very proud to represent Sweden in Canada. Two very good countries to be connected to. So I'll start with some general information about Canada. And as you probably know, Canada is very large in size. It is the second largest country in the world geographically, and it also the world's 10th largest economy. Believe it or not, we have 6 time zones, and it takes almost 6 hours to fly from east to west. We have a very multicultural population. People come from around the world. The 3 largest cities are Toronto, Montreal, and Vancouver. But about 21% of the population is foreign born. And in Toronto, which is even more multicultural, that figure is close to 50%. So a very global, country, I would say. There are some similarities with Sweden. We have a public healthcare system. And Canada is also the most educated country in the world, with 56% of the population that have a higher degree than high school. I put together some slides here, or some pictures that sort of represent Canada, I think. First of all, natural resources. We have an abundance of natural resources in Canada: forestry, mining, gas, oil, and so forth. We have a very distinct native people called the Inuit that lives mostly in the northern part of Canada. We definitely have 4 climates, just like in Sweden. We can have very harsh winters with lots of snow and cold weather, but we do have a warmer summer than Sweden, and a little bit longer summer that carries into October and sometimes in November, because today and yesterday it was close to 20 degrees outside, which is very unusual, but usually it is getting a little bit colder by this time. Canada is known for its public health care. It is well known around the world, that and similar to Sweden. Something that is maybe not so well known is that Canada has a very developed gaming industry, and is the world leader in that. And it is a progressive society that values gender equality and support of the LGBTQ communities. In terms of trade, Canada relies on global trade, and we have several trade agreements with many countries. The most important one is obviously US. Both import and export trade with US equals to 63% of total trade. If you just take the export, it's close to 80% of Canada's services and goods that goes to the US. So the United States is very important to Canada. Just this year, this summer, Canada signed the CUSMA agreement, which is the old NAFTA agreement that was renegotiated between Canada, United States, and Mexico. We also have an agreement, trade agreement with Europe, with European Union, called CETA. And CETA is actually the most comprehensive trade agreement in the world. It covers a lot of different things, not just tariffs, but also labor mobility and access to government procurement. So it is a massive agreement. It came in place 3 years ago. And it was long and hard negotiations between Canada and the European Union, but it was finalized 3 years ago. And we have seen an increase in trade between Canada and Europe since that agreement came in place. A few comparison notes here between Sweden and Canada. We have similarities like the weather and the love for hockey, but there are some differences as well. You can see in size, Canada is actually 22 times bigger than Sweden. It is a bilingual country, French and English, but French is mostly spoken in the province of Quebec. The population is about three times as many people than Sweden. 37 million people live in Canada. Most of them live in the southern part or along the border of US. About 75% actually live along the border. And now Sweden and Canada has a very diverse trading relationship. Sweden export goods to Canada, about 4 times as many as they import. So there are lots of more Swedish products that are coming to Canada than vice versa. And it is quite diverse, and it comes from many different industries. Machinery and mechanical appliances is the largest one, followed by pharmaceutical and motor vehicles. The impact of COVID-19. Here are some statistics from both countries. And the conclusion here is that when it comes to cases per million and death fatalities per million, Sweden has clearly a higher rate than Canada. But when it comes to fatalities, I would say that most of those deaths had occurred in elderly care units in both countries. So there are some similarities there. The unemployment rate is actually quite similar, and both countries, both Sweden and Canada, is investing a lot of money into stimulus packages. 16% of the GDP in Sweden and 15% in Canada. Those are among the highest in the world. So Sweden and Canada is among the 10 countries in the world that is putting most money into stimulus packages due to the pandemic. Now, when it comes to trade, Canada has had worse figures than Sweden, and that can be related to the fact that Canada did go through a complete lockdown in the spring for over 2 months, while Sweden avoided that. In terms of numbers of cases and sort of the phase that we are in right now, you can see from the graph there to the right that we are definitely into a second wave right now in Canada, just like many other countries. We had a low period during the summer and quite stable, but that has now increased just like predicted. And Ontario recorded, I think, the highest numbers yesterday. So it is spreading. We have gone through different phases since March. We had state of emergency, and then we closed all the stores and offices and schools in the spring, and then we opened up slowly in June. But different regions are doing different things, trying to sort of balance the economic recovery with what is the good, right thing to do for the people. So a lot of focus on social distancing. Everyone has to wear face masks when they go out. Recommended to work from home as well. But the schools are up and running, and the manufacturing is also up and running. In Toronto, the restaurants have been closed now for 28 days or for a month. They will open up probably this weekend. So it is a modified response during the fall. Now, in Canada, we have a federal government, and we also have each province have their own government. But the federal government is led by Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. It's the Liberal government that has been in power for over 4 years now. And on September 23rd, they came out with a throne speech where they came out with the different initiatives that they are working on, focused on the economic recovery from the pandemic. In general, the recovery package is filled with initiatives. It's very comprehensive. There are lots of different things. We just mentioned a few of them here: the creation of 1 million jobs, affordable childcare initiative, also initiative to plant over 2 billion trees to reduce the emissions. A national standard for long-term care has been presented. This was something that was very evident during the spring that Canada is lacking because there were so many deaths in the long-term care units, and there is a great need for a national standard for that. They also announced an extension of 75% wage subsidy until next year. This was a measurement that they started in the spring and was very appreciated by a lot of companies. But I should also say that the government has been criticized for spending so much money, and the other parties are saying that, you know, this is something that we will have to pay for during a long time after the pandemic. But Prime Minister Trudeau's response to that is that the low interest rates mean that we can afford it, and doing less would end up costing far more and would mean a slower recovery. But that is the debate that is going on in between the parties. Now, at Business Sweden, we have been working during this pandemic to understand what the different trends are happening around the world and how business is changing. And I'm bringing up 6 global trends that we have looked into, and we see that these are trends that not just in Canada but globally. And one is a more policy-driven economy. We see that there is increased regulations and political agendas around the world, a strengthening of data borders, an increase of data protectionism between regions and nations, and a very new competitive system. We can see that there are lots of consolidations, mergers, acquisition happening, and many businesses is forced to find new ways to survive and access new customers and market segments. A regionalized supply chain. This is quite evident that companies are looking to shorten their supply chain and be less dependent on foreign nations. So we can see that there is a lot of awareness to this, to bring that the supply chains short, to bring it shorter to the customers. And then we have the digital acceleration that, of course, had started way before the pandemic, but we can see that digital solutions are even more in demand due to the pandemic. And then lastly, on-demand customer experience. Customers are very much affected by the pandemic, and they are demanding other solutions and ways of connecting to other people or other companies. I would also like to bring up three trends that we see here in Canada, but they are not exclusive to Canada, but these are three trends that we would like to highlight. One is consumer behavior. We can see that consumers, when they are buying products, they are very much focused on health and sustainability. Customers are more demanding. They want to know where a product has been made, how was it made, and sometimes they even ask, do I really need this product? So that is something that is putting more pressure on the companies when they are sourcing their products. And it's also less focus on premium products and lavish living. It's more back to the basics, I would say. And then, of course, a large increase in shopping online. And this is a trend, of course, around the world. But in Canada has been a little bit behind other countries when it comes to online shopping. So we can see that the increase has gone up more here in Canada. And then the second trend is the virtual care. This is a great demand for that now due to the pandemic. And prior to the pandemic, at least in Ontario, we did not have billing codes for virtual care visits. So the doctors that did virtual care could not bill the province for it, but that came in place in the spring. So there is an increased access and reach out to people during virtual care, through virtual care technology. And there is a very high satisfaction rate, both among patients and doctors. And then lastly, I would like to mention the mining industry, which is really important both for Sweden and Canada. We can see that the digitalization and electrification of the operation, both in Sweden and Canada, has gone up. This was a trend that started also before the pandemic, but has really increased. Because the demand for minerals and metals are increasing as we are shifting towards a greener economy. And the demand for batteries are so great around the world. And so this is something that has an impact on the mining industry, both here and in Sweden. So Canada is hugely dependent on their fossil fuels, but they need to try to shift to a greener economy. And the government brought that up in the throne speech, and a big part of the recovery is this shift to a greener economy. And there is a group of economists and thought leaders and experts that are challenging the government to say that they need to put more money into initiatives for a cleaner and resilient recovery. And this task force is called Task Force for Resilient Recovery, and they came out with 5 ideas or suggestion. And the largest one is to invest in climate resilient and energy efficient buildings. and also to focus more on the electric vehicle industry, so more battery-driven vehicles. Go big on growing Canada's clean energy sectors. There need to be a shift to cleaner energy, and invest in the nature that Canada is well known for. And then grow clean competitiveness and jobs across Canada. All in all, this task force is saying that these 5 suggestions or plans would cost about 55 billion Canadian dollars, and that is what the Canadian government need to invest in the next over the next 5 years. Like I said, these are our suggestions, and the government has not agreed to that, but we can definitely see a need and a growing appetite from the public that the government need to invest in greener technology. So, doing business in Canada. I just wanted to start to say that in the spring, we did a business climate survey where we sent out a survey to Swedish companies in Canada and asked them, how are you doing? How are you managing with the situation? Are you profitable? Has your business gone down? What is the general business climate in Canada? And we did this survey together with the embassy and also the Swedish Canadian Chamber of Commerce. The 3 organizations collectively have done this before, and it is a Team Sweden effort. This year was a little bit different. We were part of a larger business climate survey that was done in 21 countries, so Canada being one of 21. And in the end, Canada and Singapore scored the highest for their attractiveness. So Canada is well known around the world, and I would also like to point out that the companies that are here feel very secure and like they see potential in Canada. So we had good results from that survey. So what should Swedish companies consider before they enter the Canadian market? We do ask companies to target the marketing material catered to the Canadian market. So get to know the Canadians and the Canadian market before you start making marketing material. To have a very defined and clearly communicated value proposition. So what makes your product or service different from others? And Canadians would really like to see strong business cases. They would like to see pilot projects or experience from other markets to compare with. And Canada has an added level of bureaucracy, I would say. We have 3 levels of government. We have the federal government, provincial, and then municipal government. So that can be sometimes a little bit cumbersome. So it's good to keep that in mind. And the biggest obstacle right now, I would say, is linked to our pandemic. Canada has closed their borders for international travels, and you have to have a good reason for coming here. And when you do, you need to sit in 14-day quarantine, which is mandated. So that, of course, makes it difficult for Swedish companies to do any travel to Canada right now. But the Canadians have adopted well to technology, and I think in general, not just Canadians, but a lot of people are very used to Zoom meetings and Teams, and so we see that there's a lot of interaction between companies anyway, which is a good thing. So Swedish companies must employ a targeted approach and be aware of local regulations. And Canada, like I said, is very large. We have different governments in different provinces, and a lot of decision making is done in the provinces. So what might be okay to sell in New Brunswick might not be the same story in Quebec. So it's good to know the regional differences. Of course, it's very important to build long-term relationship and be persistent. It takes time to be successful. But I would also say that Sweden obviously has a very good brand recognition in Canada. Canadians trust the Swedish brand, and it's a good thing to say that you are from Sweden or representing a Swedish company. That usually opens some doors too. So some cultural differences between Sweden and Canada. And I have put together some thoughts here. This is sort of personal experience, and other people might find it different. Actually, I think I might invite Johan to comment on this slide, but I'll just read them the way we have noticed it. A typical Swede bikes to work, is highly punctual, and wears casual business clothes. They enjoy flat organization and don't care so much for work titles. They are in general socially reserved and do not like to do small talks, but they are very straightforward with their approaches and how they what they want in conversations. And they do demand a bit of private space, and you will probably not be invited to someone's home until you are best friends. Swedes embraces gender equality, sustainability, technology, and innovations. But in the end, Swedes love to talk about the weather and hockey, of course. And compared to a Canadian, they usually drives or take the public transit to work. It depends a little bit where you live. And in general, have a little bit more stricter business dress code. It depends a little bit what industry you're in. They're quite career oriented. They like work titles and will easily give out business cards as soon as you enter a new meeting. And they socialize at ease, and they chat with everyone on the subway, in an elevator. Very easy to get along with. And they are open for small talks, and they will gladly invite you home. And they will also always offer a seat next to you on the bus, even though there are other seats that are available. And they're very polite, a little bit afraid of taking risks. And they say sorry a lot. But same thing with Swedes. They love to talk about the weather and about hockey. And we've had quite a few Swedish hockey players here in Toronto and also in Vancouver, and they are very, very popular. But I could invite my old colleague and boss, Johan Keighren, to comment on this slide. Johan used to work for Business Sweden, and he was the trade commissioner here, and have since 10 or maybe 15 years back now been running a Swedish company, Spec Ops, here in Toronto. And so Johan has been here for over 20 years and can probably relate to some of these statements. But I'll let you jump in here to see if you agree or disagree with me, Johan.
Well, I think you summarized it pretty well. Can you hear me, by the way? I guess so.
Yes. Yes.
No, I think so. And, as you say, when if you look at the typical Canadian, there's a little bit of mix of Europe and North America in there, or Europe and US, which kind of shows that it's a bit of a mix. What I may add is that if you go to Montreal, you may not want to talk about Mats Sundin. Hockey players in general is Mats Sundin was, of course, the captain for the Toronto Maple Leafs for many years. But there is certainly a strong rivalry between the hockey cities here. So
yes, no,
so
that's true.
Except for that, I think these are some good points.
And also I should mention, when it comes to Quebec, the language is very strong there. The French, and they support the French language very much, and would prefer to take all meetings in French if they could. Communication and signs and things like that has to be prominently in French. So that can be a bit of an obstacle for some companies, but as long as you are aware of it, I think it is fine.
And I would say also, Christina, that this differs a little bit depending on where you are in Canada as well. Canada is obviously a very big country, and but in general, I think you summarized it very well.
Yeah. I'm coming towards the end of my presentation, but I wanted to let you know that here at Business Sweden, we have decided to focus on 5 sectors where we see that there are some synergies and also some opportunities between Sweden and Canada. We don't work exclusively with these sectors, but these are the 5 sectors that we focus a little bit more on, and they are the mining industry, healthcare, forestry, food and consumer products, and infrastructure. We already have an abundance of Swedish companies in Canada. Some of them have been here for a long time, and some are new. But it is an attractive country for Swedish companies to establish themselves. And here's just an example of some of them. Within Team Sweden, meaning the embassy and the Swedish Canadian Chamber of Commerce, we do organize quite a few events during the year. We just had a webinar on Canada's roadmap to recovery in October, and towards the end of November, we are organizing a webinar regarding food industry. But we will also focus on the mining industry, on Canada's green economy, and digital health. So we work very much together. And then lastly, here is a slide just on Business Sweden. We are a very global organization, as you probably all know. In Canada, we have one office here in Toronto, but we also have office in New York, Washington, Chicago, and San Francisco, and in Mexico City in North America. As of this summer, we have structured ourselves in a little bit different ways. We've decided to focus on 7 industry practices, or 7 ecosystems. It's industrials, transport and automotive, energy and infrastructure, materials and mining, life science, consumer products, and digital tech. So we all employees belong to one of these industry practices, and we work very much across the border and in teams. So we are getting closer to our colleagues both in Europe and APAC. And we work as management consultants on behalf of Swedish companies, and our mandate is, of course, to help Swedish companies do business abroad and to increase their sales, as well as supporting foreign companies that want to invest in Sweden. So with that in mind, I have gone through all all my slides, but I would like to take this opportunity to invite Johan again. Like I said, he is the president of Spec Ops Software here in Canada, and has great experience from the Canadian market. And I wanted to ask you, Johan, with your, is it 20 years now, maybe in Canada, how do you see the business climate here from your experience?
I would say it's generally very good. I mean, we are in the middle of a pandemic, so it's obviously changed a little bit, but I think that has happened everywhere, so that may be irrelevant. But you know, Canada is it's open for business, as one of our premiers said, and it's not difficult to do business here. You know, you need some patience, and you need to understand the differences and so on, but it's not a complicated market. That's my kind of my input to it. So I would say if you have products that work for this market, it's definitely a market to consider.
Yeah, and we often at Business Sweden, and I'm sure you did that when you were working here too, we often refer to Canada as sort of the gateway to the North American market, because it is a little bit smaller market. It's a good way to start your business and then grow. And now with your experience from the private side, how do you feel about that? Do you still think that is the case, that Canada is a good starting point?
Yeah, I think we are an example of it. We started in Canada first, although we have a much bigger presence in the US now than we originally had, because we started on this market. But you know, so it's the North American market. You have to have an approach when you're looking at establishing yourself in North America, whether it's in the US or Canada. There are so many markets within the market, within Canada, but also within North America. So I think that the regions should always be taken into consideration when you decide where to establish a company or where you need your partner. As Christina mentioned before, over 80% of the exports from Canada go into the US. So Toronto in itself, or the greater Toronto area, it's about, you know, market size probably about the same size as Sweden. And within a 1 hour flight, you reach, I can't remember what it is, but 100 million people.
Yeah.
So when you are looking at establishing in North America, take a regional approach rather than thinking US or Canada or Mexico for that matter. Rather see what products do you have, where are your customers, and then look at the region. It's not hard to do business in the US from Canada.
Great. Yeah, good point. I think I will stop here. Stina, maybe you want to come in. Maybe there are some questions from the audience, or maybe you have some question.
Yes, thank you so much. Very, very interesting presentation, and I think there was a lot of good answers, and I guess it feels kind of safe being a Swede that you can always talk about hockey. Maybe not for me so much, since I'm from Stockholm, where it's not, you know, the same. So I have a couple of questions. One question is regarding how, as a startup, when you have had your first or gotten your first customers in Canada, what is your experience? Is it important to actually employ a native Canadian fast, or is it more common that you actually can, you know, travel back and forth for a longer time? It's a little bit of difference between countries.
I would say that most of the companies that we are helping when they get into the Canadian market, they they will employ a Canadian person here. They usually want someone that knows the Canadian market very well and can quickly get up and running for sales and so forth. So I would say that mostly Canadians, but there are instances that maybe you want to transfer a person over from the Swedish companies, and that there are visas requirements, but that can be done if it's a management position. We had one of our clients that did just that. The president in Sweden decided that he would like to spend a year in Canada and understand the Canadian customers. And so he came over, was here for 18 months, I think. And during that time, hired about 3 Canadians that then is running the company. Yeah.
I would just to add to that, I would say that whatever you do, you need to make sure that you support that position, meaning that if you do hire a Canadian, you need to be here, show your support, and while they may have the expertise about the local market, you still have expertise about your product and so on. So that support is vital. Don't think that you can employ someone here and things will turn out good by itself. It's not going to happen.
Yeah. No, I think that's a very good point. You need to have a tight communication between Sweden and the local company. There might be some cultural differences, the way we do business, and it is important that the Swedish company has sort of control of what's happening in Canada too.
Great. What would you say is the normal, I don't know if we could call it tipping point. At what point do you think you should start to consider what do you have to reach before you start to consider to actually start your business in Canada? From your perspective.
You need to do your homework. Either you do it on your own or you ask Business Sweden to do it for you. But I think it's very important to understand who are their competitors in the country, what are they offering, and what would make a difference for your company in Canada? What is your value proposition? What do you offer that no one else maybe is offering? So understand where your customers are, in what region, understand who the competitors are. And then also there might be some regulations and something that is connected to your product that you need to understand. Will it be a long time to get a license, or is it some type of rules and regulations? And it could be different for different regions. So that, I think, is a good starting point. And then I think in the end, it is important to come here and meet with potential customers and get a better understanding how they feel and how they work. So those are the points I would bring up. I don't know if Johan has anything to add to that.
No. It's a very general, broad discussion, obviously, or question. It all depends a little bit about what you do and how complex your products are, how complex the supply channel is. But I agree with everything Christina says. There are massive opportunities, but there could also be massive roadblocks. So you have to understand what those are.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes.
So, another question then. A lot of startups will have business meetings with Canadian large companies the next week during the Sweden Innovation Days and specifically the matchmaking. If you, as a startup, I mean, these meetings, Christina, you know a little bit about how the Ignite model works. So these meetings are fairly well prepared. You know that there's an interest on both sides and so on. But if you feel as a startup that this meeting was really great and there's a huge opportunity in this, how what's your next step? Because this is also in Sweden, we can be still, even if we are hungry entrepreneurs, we can be quite humble, and we don't feel that we need to connect or contact the persons a lot of times before we're getting an answer. So what's your best advice, how to proceed from that feeling that this was a really good meeting?
Yes, I think you need to be persistent, and a lot of times you have that first meeting and it feels so good and everyone is happy, and then you get back to your regular routine and you forget to follow up, or you maybe not follow up until 2-3 weeks later, and then you have lost that initial enthusiasm that you had in the first meeting. So I think follow-ups are very important, and they should be done very close to don't delay it, and sort of feed the new contact with information. It could be short emails, doesn't have to be long and complicated, but just keep that dialogue open, and provide information that they might have asked for or might not have asked for, but just to keep the interest going. So I think that is the main suggestion, I would say.
So you can email several times without getting an answer, but you shouldn't lose your hopes. Is that?
Yeah, and I think that is one of the struggles, I would say, or challenges that we have in Canada, that we can email a lot of people and they don't respond. Like it takes time. You need persistent. You can't need to email 3-4 times, and then you just need to pick up the phone and try to get to the person that way. So Canadians can be a little bit difficult to get a hold of, but once you have them on the phone or in a meeting, I would say Canadians are very open and straightforward. They are not difficult to share information. They are very friendly, and they, if they have the time, then they would gladly share experiences or information about the product. It's just to get to that first meeting that is the hurdle sometimes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you very much. I think your presentation was super, and I think you covered a lot of very, very interesting topics, and it was really great that you, Johan, also were part of it.
Yeah.
It's another insight into the market. This session is now recorded and will be available for all startups in the portal. But I'm sure that there also will be a lot of startups that after their meetings, when they realize that Canada is a very interesting market, will get in contact with you, Christina, to see.
Yes. I would welcome all inquiries, so please don't be shy. Pick up the phone or email me if you have any specific questions about Canada, and we will try to provide you with that information.
Super. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Johan.
Thank you, Christina. Thank you, everyone.
Tack. Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.